invite the moderators and the panelists up at the stage. 9th century, this is the story of Snor, known as Snor the Unruly, a Viking, and Sri Varma, an ex-student of Nalanda University. Both of them go through intense personal experiences in their wanderings until they finally meet in Kashgar and embark on a journey to Tibet. The journey is dictated part by experience and part by a commitment made by Sri Varma to a dying Buddhist monk. I'd now like to introduce the panelists and the moderators. Mr. Seppo Nurmi is the Deputy Head of Delegation at the Delegation of the European Union to India. He started his career in corporate law, being the holder of law degrees from the University of Helsinki and College of Europe, and a liberal arts degree from Georgetown University. Mr. Nurmi practiced corporate law before joining the European Commission. He has worked in important positions for the European External Action Service, as well as the European Commission, including a stint at China desk of the EEAS. He has also been the Deputy Head of Unit for International Affairs of the Directorate General for Maritime Affairs of the European Commission and has worked on trade enlargement and external relations. Professor Nirmal Kanti Banerjee taught English literature at Guwahati University and comparative literature at Jadavpur University. He worked as the editor of Sahitya Academy's prestigious journal, Indian Literature. He worked as the director of the National Book Trust and the K.K. Birla Foundation. From 2013 to 2016, he worked as the editorial consultant for the multi-volume documentation project of the Rashtrapati Bhavan. An accomplished translator from Bengali to English and vice versa, he has also edited 4 volumes of Best of Indian Literature published by the Sahitya Academy. Dr. Bharat Gupta, a former associate professor in English at the University of Delhi, is an Indian classicist, theatre theorist, sitar and surbahar player, musicologist, cultural analyst, and newspaper columnist. He is trained in both Western and traditional Indian knowledge systems using texts in Hindi, English, Gujarati, Sanskrit, and Greek. He was a McLuhan Fellow for Communication at the University of Toronto and a Senior Fellow at the Onassis Foundation, Greece. Presently, he is a trustee and executive member at the Indira Gandhi National Center for Arts, New Delhi. Also, he is serving as Vice Chairman of the National School of Drama. Mr. Indranil Banerjee is an analyst and columnist based in the National Capital Region. For several years, that is from 1999 to 2011, Mr. Banerjee ran an independent, national security-focused think tank, the Sapra India Foundation. Prior to that, he worked as a full-time journalist for over 2 decades with reputed media organizations like India Today, The Telegraph, NDTV, etc. He has made over 40 current affair programs on Indian national security issues, which have been telecast on the national television network. His focus has always been on geopolitics, national security, and national politics. I request my colleague to welcome the panelists and the moderators with flowers and a memento. the panel discussion.
Thank you. Is this on? Yeah, Mr. Gupta is not going to speak?
He is going to write.
I see.
Okay, right.
Okay. Well, thank you for that introduction, and with that, let's get going. Now, before I continue, I think a request has been made that we alter the order of speaking slightly, which I don't think will disturb the proceedings in any major manner. But what is really interesting about this is that not this little gathering we have today is not just about the people who are here, all of whom are so distinguished and who come with such wonderful histories that really it's a pleasure to be moderating, and it'll be a pleasure to hear about their comments on the book. But also I think one introduction which has been left out by the person who introduced was the author himself. Now, I think that's a major omission, but when I first heard about Mr. Chakravarty, in Bengali we pronounce it Chakravarty, I was very intrigued. Former bureaucrat, person who's worked with the World Bank. Not only that, he's written books on poetry. He's written a poetry book and he's written 5 books, which was rather intriguing. So when my former colleague suggested that I should, go and attend this and perhaps moderate, and I thought it was a very nice opportunity to meet somebody really interesting. Because at the end of the day, yes, you have a book. Now, my wife also happens to be an author. She's authored 5 books. And she, of course, wrote romantic adventure novels published by Mills and Boons and HarperCollins. But, the little that I know about authors, and they're a pretty intriguing lot, let me assure you, speaking from personal experience, it's not just about the book. I'm sure all of you are going to read this book and it'll be an interesting read if nothing else. But I think the book talks a lot about the author. A part of the author is always in the book, So even if it's a detective novel, something like Hercule Poirot, there's a bit of Agatha Christie in all those books as well. It's about how she looks at herself. What is her perception about herself? A little odd perhaps, but a person with a brilliant mind. So the book is also about the author. And that is also a very, very interesting thing. So I hope that during this discussion, and why he really came up with this kind of book, I think that would be really illuminated. So with those introductory remarks, let me pass on the thing to our...
Sure, if my introduction will be very much more enlightening about the book, but absolutely it will be about my impressions having read the book. But first of all, I would like to start by thanking the organizers, and in particular the author, Mr. Bappaditya Chakravarty, and the publisher, Garuda Books, for inviting me and giving me the chance to share my thoughts about the book, The Two Wanderers. And I would also like to acknowledge my co-panelists and our moderator, all of them eminent personalities in their own fields. As for myself, I'm a diplomat who enjoys reading, in particular books that are somewhat off the beaten track, like this one. It combines many of my favorite topics: history, adventure, politics, and human nature. It is a good and satisfying read. The idea of going back to the 9th century, bringing together a Viking and a scholar from Nalanda in India, and having them to travel together to Tibet, is a novel one. It is difficult to imagine 2 more different people and 2 more different cultures, both questioning their own worlds. For one, it's a world of violence, and for the other, it is the fear of routinized life. According to historians, there are no documented records of Vikings ever traveling as far as India and modern-day China. In the 9th century, of course, Tibet was its own empire. But who knows? The Vikings certainly ventured far beyond their Scandinavian homelands. They definitely made it to Central Asia, and maybe a few made it even further. Myself, coming from Finland, I have a special regard for Snorre, the unruly Viking. The Finns may not have been Vikings themselves, but they surely had strong ties with the Vikings through trade, cultural exchanges, and warfare. And after all, they were all neighbors, so difficult to avoid each other. And about the book itself, I can see where Snorre is coming from. I'm not surprised at the roots of his mental unease, a hard, savage, and violent life. The Norse sagas are tales of violence, but also of anguish. As far as Sri Verma is concerned, the book's other protagonist, I am impressed, but not surprised at the strength of his character. He's a scholar, his planning is meticulous, and so is his execution, maybe not dissimilar to the author of this book. Where Snorre often acts without thinking, Sri Verma is all about thinking, at times maybe even a little too much. The plot of the book engages the mind of the reader from the beginning, and the twists and turns of the tale are captivating. From the fighting between the warlords and the Buddhist lamas in Tibet, to the usurping of Kiev in modern-day Ukraine by the Viking king Oleg the Seer. The book is an adventure, but it is much more than that. It is essentially the story about the unlikely friendship between two very different people. To me, they represent two sides of human nature. Together, they form the whole. The book thus raises important questions in the reader's mind. I would like to congratulate Bappa on his authorship and understanding of history and human nature. I would also like to thank him for writing clearly and eloquently. This is a book that one should read more than once. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Numri, for an excellent introduction to the book. And I think you've piqued our interest.
You cannot tell.
All right, then we'll carry on. Mr. Gupta will speak after we are all done. So thank you, Mr. Numri, for that. And now, Professor Bappaditya. Oh, is that the, sorry, the order, or am I mistaken? Or is it Priya? Mr. Gupta. Mr. Gupta. Okay, sorry.
Thank you so much. I have read about 70 pages of this book in last 2 days. It's a remarkably distinctive work in style, theme, as well as portraiture of the characters. Now, honestly, in 70 pages, you don't get to see all the characters or the totality of the book. But as we say in Hindi, that in order to, I'm translating it, that in order to know if the rice is good, you don't have to eat the whole pot. You just have to eat a few spoons and you get to know that this is something distinct and special, very, very special, and it is. Now, I also thought that this book is aiming at showing something like the stereotype of the East and the West, but in a very different way. Because there is the Sri Varma, sophisticated graduate from Nalanda, the best possible school, and on the other hand there is the Viking, the Snorre, the man of action, and action only, a man of brawn. So this contrast put into a real journey. The journey is delineated extremely well, sir. I must congratulate you because the style of the book is that the chapters are very small, but the chapters are intense. It's not something that goes into detail. It's not that you draw a story in terms of one episode after another, but it is more like perhaps what some of the ancient Indian books aimed to do, was to give episodes, but very meaningful episodes. And each episode would almost stand by itself. So there is something of that pattern in this book. Whatever I read, I could see from different parts of the book that is followed very consistently, and the characters are drawn out extremely well. I can't claim to say what is the grand conclusion that Mr. Chakravarty derives out of this encounter of brown and grey, or east or west, or call it whatever stereotype you like, but it would be something very sensitive, and I have promised myself to read the book patiently and fully whenever I can. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Gupta, for your observations. And now request Professor Chatterjee to tell us something about the book.
Landmark a few things, as both the speakers were rather brief. So just to give a demonstration about Bappaditya Chakravarty's research, as well as about the profundity of thought that he is capable of, I have landmarked a few paragraphs which I would like to read if time permits. But that apart, regarding those profundity of thought, let me begin negatively. I know him as a person, and at times I was so much bowled over by the observations that I even suspected whether he has chanced upon an ancient manuscript and translated it here, or whether these thoughts are coming from within. So, with due respect to my co-panelists, the author, and the learned audience here, let me begin by telling you that in our early college days, we were required to read a poem called The Wonder. And it's an old English poem written in the Anglo-Saxon dialect. So we were required to translate it into English, pure English, understandable, intelligible English, and read it as a part of our text. That is my first encounter with a wonder. And that poem was about a person narrating his miserable plight, having lost his lord and kinsman, traveling around, wandering around, and ultimately realizing that everything is rounded off in heaven. So it is his realization through his wandering, the value of faith and forbearance on the Lord himself. So I started thinking that does Bappaditya Chakravarty's book also will lead us somewhere in that direction. Then again, by the laws of association, the very term, the unique title, Two Wanderers, gave rise to some other thoughts in mind. By law of association, I remembered the famous play by Annie Ziegler, which most of you must have read or watched at least. I remembered this, the Caspar David Friedrich's very celebrated painting called The Wanderer on the Sea of Fog. And that painting also demonstrates the tremendous power of nature on human mind. And then, of course, you cannot but remember two original wanderers, Moudgalion and Sariputta. The details about whom are there almost in every Buddhist text. And they were young wanderers in search of spiritual truth, left their home and heart, and they chanced upon some teachings of Buddha, and Buddha was still alive. So after listening to the teachings of Buddha, which was being distributed in parts form at that time, they managed to meet Buddha, was accepted as monks, ordained as monks, and later on they became the two closest disciples of Lord Buddha. So there were two original wanderers. So the very title of the book is so evocative that it brought into mind so many wanderers of the past, The other thing, Professor Gupta has mentioned the organizational part of the book regarding the plot construction and other things. I would just like to add one thing, that the narrative pattern of the book, the narrative style of the book is also very unique, in the sense that when Snorri is talking, he is telling his tale to his own people. He is telling his tale to his wife and son and the children, the grandson, others from time to time, sitting around an open fire and trying to relive, trying to remember what has happened in his life. When Sri Varma is telling, it is divided into Snorri's tales and Sri Varma's tales. Some chapters are being told by Snorri, and some chapters are being told by Sri Varma. I'm not going to introduce them because the ambassador here has already introduced Snorri and Sri Varma. One is a Viking warrior, full of adventure and fight, combat. Another is a spiritual learner, passed out from Nalanda and has gone out in search of the meaning of life. Now, the stories are balanced together. When Snorri is describing his story, telling his people, then it is going in, it is a different kind of vitality, even in the language. So I wonder actually, Bappaditya Chakravarty, how did he manage to, use a register of words and phrases and sequence of sentence and syntax in such a manner that the two registers differ. The style of Sri Varma is writing a diary. So his style is somber, sober, appealing to you, to your mind, sending you on your own spiritual quest, sending you into meditation. And Snorri's descriptions are full of vitality and vigor, and Proust's style is different. So I tremendously, admired this unique structure of the book. Then what I also, let me tell the positives first. What I also particularly liked in Bappaditya Chakravarty's book is the amount of research that has gone into the book. Research on topography, history, geopolitics of entire North India, of the Silk Road, of Tibet, even of Nordic states of the ambassador here. And that too, that research is also not the contemporary state of affairs about which you can find in Google and other places. That research is back into 9th century, some 1200 years back. And how we get to know from the book that on your way from Sweden to Kashgar, you have to cross two rivers. One is called Embark, another is called Darya. Then you have to pass through Temdek Terek, a small desolate village a little away from the Emba river. Then you go through Kazali and Chachkand. From Chachkand you cross Terek Devan or Popla Pass and then traverse to the Pamir mountain, crossing two high passes and Isfarian river. Is it not mind-boggling? How does he know all these things? Then on the way one walks through Kokand and Margilan, where there is an old fort which the author has found out that it is believed to have been built by none other than Alexander the Great, known in that area as Sikandar. Then the author further tells us that Snore and his entourage ate at Nomad villages a dish called Besparmak or five-fingered soup because it is so thick that one could eat it with his hand. And then the author goes on to the extent of telling us its ingredients also. Cabbage, potatoes, carrots, onions, mutton, rice, pepper and salt. Now where does he gather all this information from, I wonder? And what was the merchandises in Cheshkan Bazaar? Brasswares from Afrasia, carpets from Bukhara, spices from India, silks from Cathay, and furs from Siberia. And what was the language of Kashgar? Turkic, not Persian. Up to here we have been negotiating Persian, but suddenly we moved to Turkic, a new information. Who was the ruling dynasty of Kashgar? Ilak Khanids, who captured it from Uyghurs. Now the moment I come across Uyghurs, I felt, at least for once I am in a territory within my knowledge. Because we often read in the newspapers about the Uyghur community of China who are being discriminated against and persecuted by the Chinese government. So this is the only term which I find, a little familiar. And this place, Kashgar, is rich and important because all the caravans traveling through the Silk Road has to pass through Kashgar. Now it is important to our story also. Why important? Because this is where the two wanderers meet for the first time. One wanderer has come from, he is from Norway, but he has come from Sweden to deliver something here to the local ruler, but he was betrayed and he was to be assassinated. He has escaped one assassination beat by virtue of Sri Varma. Sri Varma happened to be walking around the river side, and when he noticed that 3-4 men have attacked one person. So Sri Varma was not sure whether the person, the victim, is good or bad. But his teaching told him that 4 men or 3 men attacking 1 man, he must defend the single person. So that is how their relationship started. And when Snore learns from Sri Varma that he is going to Tibet, Snore thought that perhaps the only place where he can escape the assassination beat of the rulers here was to go to Tibet with Sri Varma, because these people will not be able to catch him there. This Kashgar is very important to our story, and then the story progresses in this way. I would not like to give away the rest of the story because I would want you to buy the book and read it. But as the master of ceremony read out a synopsis, from that you can understand that ultimately it was a question of search, question of deliverance from wandering to traveling, because the Chodje Lama told Sri Varma that so long you were wandering. And I went to my dictionary, found that the meaning, etymological meaning of the wanderer is a a person who travels without any purpose, without any destination. Whereas a traveler has a purpose and has a destination. And as the two great lamas, sort of entrusted Sri Varma with some chores, certain important things of Buddhism to be delivered in Lhasa monasteries. So Sri Varma's wandering changed into traveling. Thank you very much.
Thank you for an excellent account and very interesting observations. Really makes us, I'm sure it makes everyone want to read this book. Now I'd request Mr. Gupta to come onto the, or from there itself? Fine, okay.
It's just on the first one.
Thank you very much, sir. Good afternoon to all of you. I feel proud to be here to associate with this book launch. Very nicely shared with that, and the meaning of the wanderer he has given, dictionary meaning, that the person who travels without purpose or destination. But in this book, what I understood, both destination and the purpose is given in that. I know him, as I have said for the last, and he is a man of knowledge, and a man of knowledge and man of skill, who can convert his knowledge into book. कलमबंद करके इन्होंने ये बुक लिखी है, और ये भी एक आर्ट एंड कला होती है जो कि एटलीस्ट आई डोंट हैव दैट, आई डोंट possess that. So many times I have depended on him, Dr. Chakravarty. He has been so kind to me. I will not take much of your time, but I will say that he has written many articles and books on other subjects also, not only this. He has written on the accounting profession, he has written on the manuals, accounting manual for the municipal committees and other NGOs, etc. So he is a man of knowledge, and he has got a skill also. And what I will say finally, the book he has written, I think the people who have the opportunity to have it, it will enrich their knowledge about this subject we just covered. With this word, I wish him the best, and I wish that he continue his efforts और कर्मबद्ध करते रहे आगे भी जो है. With this, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Gupta. And now I request the author to talk about his book.
You want me to take suomoto cognition of the book, or would you like to ask some questions? Like to ask some questions?
You would like to have your
Personal opinion.
thoughts.
What made you write it? What is your motivation?
One thing I would like to share, that he predicts futures also. Whatever he has predicted for me, it has come true. So that means I have benefit of.
Can I ask you a question?
Please.
To begin with?
Please.
This, I was heartbroken that you killed Pema. Because up to 123 pages of the book, there was no female character. Then Pema enters. She is the daughter of a local chieftain in Tibet. And Snore, with his hot Nordic blood, immediately fell for her. Had worries. Pema was more controlled, but she encouraged his fancy to a certain extent. Then that terrible kidnapping attempt happened, and Snore rescued Pema from the kidnappers through a heroic fight. Now, we poor reader of fiction, what you would expect? After the hero rescues the heroine with such, great aplomb and risking his own life, the general expectation of a reader of fiction will be the heroine will respond to it, become grateful, and will smile more towards him. But she goes into a shell. She goes into a shell, ignores him totally, and ultimately one understands that you have given the reason that she has discovered the conspiracy between her stepfather and her would-be consort. But So much so that ultimately she committed suicide. To the utter dismay of Snow, I felt very bad for Snow. Why are you so heartless?
Well, there is a short answer to that, which is an original thought. And with due regard to Mrs. Banerjee, who writes romantic novels, for me, romance is the art of not knowing the last bit. You see, you go to a jungle, you hear birds chirping, and there is a cloud and a fog and something. It's romantic. But then the fog disperses, and you see that it's the mother bird screaming at her mate. The romance is gone. The other thing is the art of not knowing the last bit, which is something that I always feel should be preserved, so that the romance reveals itself, and not through any contrived agency. It should reveal itself. That's what I try. And you see, like the Japanese, if you have a cracked vase, it has more value. So a broken heart put together has more value, doesn't it? And about the book and why I wrote it, there is a trivial answer and there is a serious answer. I'll give you the trivial answer first. The trivial answer is this, that my wife comes from the land of the Vikings and I am an Indian. So the plot is revealed from that. So this is the trivial answer. And the serious answer is that I wanted to find two sides of human nature which could be very clearly distinguished. Because while on the one hand you say there's only shades of grey when you're describing a human being, it is at the same time true that within the black there are shades of black, and within the white there are shades of white. They need not meet. But what I've tried to do is to bring them to meet. As suppose said that there is an adventure in this, and Professor Gupta also has said, there is an adventure in this. I have my own definition of adventure. For me, adventure, you will not find it in the dictionary, but for me, adventure is the art of exploring the nothingness inside. That is my definition. Now in this book, you have adventure when you step out and adventure when you step in. And I try to show that adventure when you step out and adventure when you go in, they can together make a meaning. Am I understandable?
Somewhat esoteric, but nonetheless interesting.
Well, if there is anything more esoteric than the human being in this world, I don't know what it is. The fact that we exist, the fact that we talk about our existence, I think is the height of Professor Gupta being the expert in demonstrative culture and art will be able to say more about it, because that is what you do on the stage when you plan your choreography or your dances or your placement of characters. The essence of it is, and I don't want to take up too much time, but I'd like to say that the essence of this is you act out something that is inside. And then you act it out in terms of a drama that you create inside you. Okay? Understand? And this drama, which ultimately you could call a psychodrama, because it comes from inside, it's connected to psychology. This drama, if you can understand what drama everyone is playing, what script a person is living, whether it is a script given to him, roles given to him, or it is a role that he has created for himself, a script that he has created for himself. So, for Snow, the script had been given to him, a life of violence, looting, plundering, raping, what have you. And for Shiva, from the very beginning he has learned to create a role for himself. So, what I try to do this book is to bring them together. See?
Thank you. Thank you. That is very interesting indeed. And perhaps, unless one really reads this book with some amount of thought, one won't get the more subtle aspects which you're trying to bring forth in this state of, otherwise which outwardly seems to be an adventure.
It is. You see, as I say, this is an adventure in terms of stepping out and going in. And when you step out, then you see the nothingness outside, which doesn't make meaning anymore. There is an episode in the book where Snorri kills a rogue, and he talks to himself and he says, okay, the man was ugly. He deserved an ugly death. Was I less ugly for having chosen that particular action? Was I less ugly? So it is that when you step out and see, and then you go in. You see, for me, the two characters, Shivama and Snow, they are given a boon by the Lama, that you can talk to each other, right? Mentally, without some training, etc., etc., you can talk to each other. Now, that for me has symbolized the fact that the two sides of human nature, one which is violent, action-oriented, nothing else, the other which is thinking, planning, executing, they can be brought together in terms of a bridge to become a whole. So the two of them become one human being. And the human being still has those sides. They don't go away. But each side of the human being sees what the other side is doing and tries to learn from it. Finally, we still have a little time. Finally, at the end, can I read something from the book? At the very end, if you go, I have said something that let me read this passage. I think that will illustrate what I'm trying to say more than anything else. This is on page 329. I, Shivama, write this at the behest of my Guru, Shivam Lama. He has explained to me the need to do so. He said that a man's mind can be thought of as a series of bells, each with a different note. I think you can understand it in terms of your grammar. A man thinks of a syllable and a note is played. A man thinks of a word and a little phrase emerges. The way to one's balance is to play notes, phrases that are in tune with the celestial harmony that pervades all the world. And it is only by being in that harmony that a man may realize his true position and therefore his potential. The first step is to write down what one feels as each word emerges from the mind. And then onto the parchment, one should listen to the music of the bells in one's mind. Disturbed people do not listen to that music, and therefore go farther and farther away from the essence of themselves, and therefore also the essence of reality. This is what I really mean as the essential lesson of the book. That once you reach that stage, then you try to integrate it inside. After having acted out, after you've acted out the drama, whether it belongs to you or it belongs to somebody else's drama you're playing. After you've done that, where do you go? And that is the question. For me, you see, and that is going to be the final statement. You see, we have an epic called the Mahabharata. And in the Mahabharata, after the war ends between the two sides, the grand old grandfather, Pitamaha Bhishma, he's lying on his bed of arrows. He lies on his bed of arrows waiting for death. And then, at that time, Yudhishthira, who was won the war, he comes to him and says, now that I'm going to become a ruler, will you give me some advice? And Vishnu replies that in order to rule well, you need authority, you need elegance in doing what you do, and you need to be able to identify the truth. There he says, and it goes for many countries, in the word red. Then he says, my son, the essence of authority is order. The essence of elegance or beauty is structure. After all, which is your own structure that determines how beautiful or handsome you will be. So the essence of elegance is structure. And the essence of truth is method. Because it is only through the method that you have chosen that you will know what kind of truth you will get. And he also points out that there is therefore no universal truth. You will only have you may have a perception of the universal truth. But it will be your perception of the universal truth. You have no way of saying that this is the universal truth. So the essence of truth is method. And this is where this book begins, with Sri Verma saying that I'm on the search for a search. And I have been asked this question by several people. What do you mean by search for a search? I say that this is the search for a search of the method to get at the truth. Because you cannot say, this is the method I will apply. You must have search for the method that you feel you will be able to apply. Just as a painter must work in various ways, with all kinds of media, before he knows that this is the way I paint. Then he becomes a painter, an artist really. Before that he is just a painter. Then he becomes an artist. I think I'll stop here.
That was very beautifully put, Mr. Chakravarty. I must congratulate you. And very profound thoughts. With those profound thoughts, I think we should conclude. conclude this session. And thank you once again for inviting all of us for this really interesting session. Thanks again.
No more questions? Professor?
You know, what I read through the book, little as it is, I wanted to tell you that this pattern of action and then contemplation immediately on that action, this is a very ancient method of Indian theatre. All ancient plays are written on this pattern. That whatever is presented as a song is actually a meditative reflection on what has just happened in the last 10 minutes. So the same thing that you're saying, that what is externally done is then re-evaluated, so that there would be another action and this journey would go on. That is the journey, real journey.
Listen, would I be very wrong if I said that Bhasa's Pratima is a prime example of this?
Yeah, well, almost all plays follow
Almost all plays follow
this pattern.
Pratima suddenly came to my mind. Yes, you are absolutely right in this. There are certain ethical dilemmas in the book, in the beginning, where, and there are certain management lessons also in the book, where Sri Baba is taught whether you are fighting a battle or you are planning a political strategy or anything. How? The essence is very simple. Minimize the risk of maximum loss. And this is something that people forget when they plan strategy. Right? And he gets taught this lesson in very many ways. That you should always evaluate what is the maximum loss. You go and you try to save 5 people. Okay. In the process you will get killed. So you are out of the game. You have your maximum loss, but you have not got your objective. So in everything that you do, in everything that one does, this is the principle to be followed. Minimize the risk of maximum loss.
Garuda, any questions?
No, I have asked already.
Pardon? He's asked already. He's asked already. Seppo?
I could just ask that, is this a monograph or a startup or something? Because it has elements in the book that's...
Yeah, well, if you are looking for a sequel are you looking for a sequel?
No, I was just ready to read. The book has elements that could
Yes,
develop.
yes, it certainly has. And in fact, I am planning a sequel, which I think, with a bit of luck and the blessings of the All-Father, will come out sometime.
Happy to hear it.
Thank you. Any questions from the audience?
Would anybody from the audience like to ask questions?
No question, but I can just state that when I read the book, it was like living a journey for myself. And I stopped reading midway because I was dreaming of, horses falling off the cliffs, and so I had to just pull the trigger back, stop reading, and then take it page by page. Otherwise, once you start reading the book, it starts haunting you. So, well written, Doctor. Very well.
For the young audience, generally they are given to very very linear narrations. What would you say for the young audience? What is there in the book for them?
Well, you see, the young audience, first of all, it is not written for the young audience, let me be very clear. But that also doesn't mean that I would like to cut out 3/4 of the market, to be very practical. Now, having said that, you can read the book as a story, simply as a story of two people who meet accidentally, who have then undertake a journey, and then there are events during their journey, a little bit of magic here and there, and so on and so forth. Just read it as a story. But what I feel, that once you've read it, I think parts of it will stick in your mind, whether you like it or you don't like it. And if parts of it stick, even in the young audience's mind, even if 5% of it sticks in the young person's mind, I'll say my job is done.
I enjoy what Chaji, we got on first name terms, and we said in Kolkata we'd have called you Bappa. And the last portion of your presentation, which most of the time we could not hear because you were talking to your fellow peers. So you should possibly bounce off this book with some game theory people. Theoretical economists, not the Amartya of the world, but people like probably Prashanta Patnaik, who have the ethical and the moral, even when they are deeply involved in esoteric maths. So, game theory has this concept of maximum minimum, as you know probably. So this, your last bit, we haven't read the book, so you must pardon my ignorance. I'm merely going by your assertion. Try and bounce off your last philosophical debate which you were having with yourself. Try it out with some game theory people.
Let me explain, Garuda. First of all, this, as Nirmala had pointed out long back, this has involved a lot of research. And the idea of minimizing the risk of maximum loss is actually historically accurate. It's much older than game theory. Much, much older. The first, to my understanding, the first application of minimize the risk of maximum loss was when Hannibal defeated the Romans at the Battle of Cannae. If you analyze that strategy of Hannibal's, which also created the whole concept of the soft core and this and that, you will find it there. It was because Napoleon did not apply it that he lost in Spain. Not Waterloo, but in Spain. Waterloo was a different issue altogether. And there are many other examples, and they all predate game theory. Okay. Now, therefore, if one is to look for sources of this understanding or this wisdom, one can simply go back to history. And you know, the biggest example in history, which also predates game theory, by the way, the biggest example of this is called the Charge of the Light Brigade. The Battle of Crimea, where, due to the sheer idiocy of the Earl of Sandwich, he lost everything. So, because he didn't understand this particular principle, minimize the risk of maximum loss. And that cannons to the right of them, cannons to the left of them, cannons
Volleying and thunder.
Volleying and thunder. So that part should not have taken place. The light brigade should not have been decimated. The heavy brigade should also not have been decimated. It was sheer idiocy. So, anyway, the point is, certainly game theory has a lot to teach us. Especially in this kind of a case where, with my young friend Vishal sitting there, where we are looking at non-zero sum games. Okay, because essentially it becomes a non-zero sum game. But let it be at that. What we can say is that from history we learn that this principle is as old as, let's say, 3,000 years.
May I react to that sir, very quickly? From the charge of the Light Brigade onwards, let's come back to the Battle of Stalingrad. Zhukov's famous remark on the Soviet casualties, you know what he said? We have taken the hit, we have taken the blood, the Volga is flowing with blood, but we have driven the Germans out. And it's a lesson that the Knights of the Teutonic Order, are you aware of that? Throughout history, Germany has always been trying to go eastwards. And the Slavonic countries have suffered. Zhukov said that this will be a lesson which Germany will never forget. And that's partly turned out to be. So we have historical, your thoughts have historical connotations. I would like you to, no, we can exchange notes later.
Okay, I will just say a small thing here because I think we will be going off the subject otherwise. My short comment is that what was the statement? Minimize the risk of maximum loss. If you say my maximum loss is Rodina, the motherland, if you say that this is my maximum loss, then you minimize the risk of it. Then people are not of consideration. Right? And Marshal Zhukov was certainly a great enough general to realize it. Because for a Russian, nothing is more important than Rodina.
The Rodina.
Rodina.
I think clearly this book will generate a lot of different ideas and different thoughts on various things, since it deals with such profound subjects as inner and outer battles. But I think we'll end it there, if that's all right with everyone. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chakravarty, for inviting all of us once again. And all the best, and best of luck with your other writing ventures. I'm sure.
And you have one more of my book right there, called Swordplay. It's a thriller. And as different from this book as chalk is from cheese. That's one. This is this.
Now we gratefully acknowledge Mr. N.D. Gupta, member of Rajya Sabha, former president at Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, and past board member at International Federation of Accountants. We also have eminent financial personality Dr. Sunil Gulati, former council member at Institute of Chartered Accountants India. I would request my colleague to welcome them with flowers and memento. I request Mr. Gupta to join us at the dais and unveil the book.
I think this one is that you have to actually unveil the book for the audience. It is a book launch. Formally
इनको ऊपर बुला लो सर को ऊपर बुला लो ना
सर
सर को भी ऊपर सर
सर ऊपर
Showing the audience. We'll hold it together. And distinguished panelists and chief guest today, although you arrived slightly late, Mr. Andy Gupta and Dr. Sunil Gulati. On behalf of me personally and on behalf of the publishers and all these young ladies and gentlemen who have helped me organize this, I owe you all, we owe you all thanks, a very deep and heartfelt gratitude that you have been patient, that you have listened to all the panelists and everybody here very carefully, and I could see that your interest from your faces, I could see that the interest did not flag at any point in time. And may I now invite everybody for a cup of tea outside? And thank you very much. And have a lovely evening ahead. Please join us for tea.
रोल यस
My journey with the book began about 4 years ago. And the reason why I wrote this book was that I wanted to talk about a time when it was a golden period in India, and Indians were certainly going all over the place, all over the world, in search of knowledge, in search of trade. And I wanted to also introduce the other element, which was so different from that of India, and to show them up as contrasts. And my purpose was that no matter how difficult and how different such meetings and such journeys are, nevertheless, if people decide to walk with each other, they can. The main character, the Viking, is a violent man, like all Vikings. He is a man who lives by loot and plundering and everything. Shivarma is a student from Nalanda, in a way different. But he is not afraid to defend his own ideal. When he thinks that something needs to be done, he does it. But he plans for it. And I wanted to show that these two different people can walk together, can work together, can seek a common goal, a common objective, and yet they can go away, lead their own lives, at the same time retaining this thread that they've built up, this thread of understanding, this thread of humanism. If there is anything that this book has, it is humanism, which comes from the Lamas. It comes from kindness, compassion, feeling for others. But at the same time, it is also very practical, because the Lamas teach them that you have to apply what you learn, what you understand. In one place in the book, Lama tells Shivarma and Snorri that you have to understand that if you break something, a vase, one of you, Shivarma, has to put it back as it was. The other one, Snorri, if the vase is broken, try to put it back so that it is of more use. And then the Lama tells Shivarma that if you want to know what you want to do with your life, then understand the meaning of your name. Shri means, in our language, harmony, Lakshmi. And Varma means an armor, Varma. So Shri Varma means you are an armor for harmony. So your job is that when there is disharmony, you have to bring back harmony. You are the armor for harmony.
So another question, that in current scenario, how do you think that your book relates to any character in the current political scenario, or where you think that it leads, or this book relates to the current circumstances of the scenario?
Well, I did not write this book with a reference to the current political scenario or anything of the kind. The only lesson that I will give is, again, I will repeat, it is about humanism. And I think more than religion, this book is about spiritual understanding of humanism. How different people can live together, how different people may be able to understand each other, if only we show them the way. And the way is not violence. If you wish to relate it to the scenario as is, you are welcome.
And any remark which you think that the current conflicts which is going around in the world, which we all are witnessing, Russia-Ukraine war and the other wars which are going on. So, somewhere
that is not a subject that relates to the book. It will become a personal opinion. It is my personal opinion, but then there is something about the book. In the book.
Yes, sir.
In the book there is an incident where Shivarma tries to save a merchant, and he does save the merchant, beats the robbers. Then the merchant says, why did you do it? Why did you have to hurt those people, the robbers? He said, well, that was the right thing to do. He said, you think about it. Whether you did the right thing by me is understood. Did you do the right thing by yourself? You were starting on in life, and suppose the man had cut off your leg or your hand, how would you be? Nothing. So, did you do the right thing? You examine it. And later on, his guru tells him with reference to the same incident. He said, when it happened, who was the subject of the incident? He says, obviously the merchant, the old man. Then why did you make yourself a subject? Who gave you the right to take over a situation and say that I will deal with it? Why did you not give him a chance? There is always a chance. There is always time to plan. You do not really have to enter into a conflict immediately. There are always options. So that is a lesson that one could draw. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.